The parking lot was almost empty, the kind of silence that made every sound echo. Mabel Cole, 65 years old, walked toward her old sedan parked under a flickering streetlight. Her hands carried the weight of a long day at the office. She unlocked the door, ready to sit down, when a small cold hand suddenly covered her mouth. Her heart jumped. For a split second she thought she was being attacked, but then she heard a trembling whisper. "Grandma, don't say a word, they might be listening." Mabel turned in shock. In the back seat, crouched low, was her 10-year-old grandson Carter. His wide eyes glowed in the dim light, filled with both fear and determination. He looked far older than his years, as if he had just seen something no child should ever see. She slid into the driver's seat, still shaken, and whispered back, "Carter, what are you doing here? You scared me half to death." Carter leaned closer, his voice barely audible. "Grandma, I heard them talking upstairs. Mom and Miss Jenkins. They were talking about you. They said you would sign papers and then you'd have nothing left." Mabel froze, the keys slipping in her trembling hand. For a moment the world seemed to tilt. The people she trusted most, her own daughter-in-law and her loyal assistant, plotting against her. The betrayal cut so deep she could hardly breathe. She gripped the steering wheel tightly, forcing herself to stay calm. Carter's hand clung to hers, small but firm. The warning had been delivered. Nothing would ever be the same again. Mabel Cole was no ordinary grandmother. At 65, she carried herself with quiet strength, the kind that came from decades of sacrifice and relentless hard work. When her husband passed away many years ago, she did not collapse under grief. Instead, she poured every ounce of energy into building Cole Industries, a mid-sized manufacturing company that had become both her life's work and her family's legacy. She had one son, Daniel. From the time he was a boy, she imagined him one day taking over the company, continuing the dream she and her late husband had begun together. Daniel, however, was different. He loved technology, travel, and quick opportunities. He worked remotely most of the time, often buried in projects overseas. Though he loved his mother, he was rarely around, leaving much of the day-to-day business in the hands of others. And then there was Rebecca, Daniel's wife, Mabel's daughter-in-law. To the outside world, Rebecca was the picture of charm. Her smile was warm, her voice calm and reassuring. She always called Mabel Mom with a sweetness that seemed genuine. Neighbors admired her, colleagues praised her. Even Mabel, at first, believed she was a blessing to the family. But beneath that polished exterior, seeds of ambition had begun to grow. At Mabel's side in the company was Caroline Jenkins, her longtime assistant. Caroline had started as a secretary fresh out of college, and over the years became almost like family. She knew every contract, every balance sheet, every deal that had kept Cole Industries alive through tough times. Mabel trusted her without question. That trust now hung in the balance. The final figure in Mabel's circle was Mr. Thompson, the family's lawyer. He had handled everything from property deeds to wills. He was reliable, or so Mabel thought, though recently his hesitation and nervous glances suggested a man caught in something larger than paperwork. Life had settled into a pattern. Daniel was away, Rebecca helped with company meetings, Caroline handled the details, and Mr. Thompson oversaw the legal side. To most people, it looked like a strong, well-organized family business, but Mabel felt the undercurrent, the little hints that something was shifting. Rebecca had begun pressing harder about legal documents. "Mom," she would say sweetly, "why don't you let us handle the stress? Just sign a power of attorney. That way the company can run smoothly while you rest." The words sounded kind, but there was a chill beneath them, one Mabel could never quite shake. Carter's small fingers clutched Mabel's hand as if it were the only anchor keeping him safe. His voice shook, but his eyes told her he was certain about what he had heard. "They said you'd sign everything without even reading it. They laughed, Grandma. They called you dumb." The words stung more than she could admit. Mabel had survived decades of sleepless nights, business risks, and personal sacrifice, and yet in the mouths of her daughter-in-law and trusted assistant, she was reduced to a fool. She wanted to dismiss it, to believe Carter had misunderstood, but the way his little body trembled left no room for doubt. "Tell me exactly what you heard," she whispered, her heart pounding against her ribs. Carter's lips quivered. "Mom said once you signed the company, the house, everything would be hers. Miss Jenkins told her not to worry, that the lawyer was already on their side. They said you'd be gone soon." The silence that followed felt like a storm building in her chest. Mabel thought of Rebecca's warm smile, of Caroline's loyal years, of Mr. Thompson's careful advice. Could all of it have been a mask? She tightened her grip on Carter's hand. "You're very brave for telling me this," she said softly. "But we can't let them know you heard. Promise me, Carter, not a word to anyone else." He nodded quickly, his eyes brimming with tears. "I promise." Mabel forced a calm breath, though her insides burned with betrayal. This was no longer about documents or contracts, it was about survival, hers and Carter's. She could not afford to be impulsive. She had to be careful, calculating, patient. As the dim glow of the parking lot flickered across the windshield, Mabel felt the weight of Carter's warning settle into her bones. The boy had uncovered something terrible, and now they were bound together in a secret too dangerous to ignore. That night, sleep would not come. Mabel lay awake, Carter's frightened voice echoing in her ears. By morning, the lines between suspicion and certainty had blurred. She could not dismiss what her grandson had told her. Too many small details already pointed toward betrayal. At breakfast, Rebecca floated into the kitchen with her usual grace. Her smile was as polished as ever, her tone honeyed. "Mom, you look tired. You really should let me take over some of the business stress. I can handle it. Just sign those papers Mr. Thompson prepared, and you'll finally have peace." Mabel forced a polite nod, masking the storm inside. Across the table, Carter kept his eyes lowered, his spoon clinking softly against his cereal bowl. The boy didn't dare look up, but Mabel could feel the tension radiating from him. He, too, knew the mask Rebecca was wearing. Later that afternoon, Mabel replayed the meeting in her mind. Rebecca had insisted, over and over, on the power of attorney. Caroline had sat beside her, nodding silently, avoiding eye contact. Mr. Thompson had fumbled with his notes, answering direct questions with vague phrases. It was as if they had all rehearsed their roles in a play, each one hiding a darker script. Unable to endure the suffocating atmosphere of her own home, Mabel drove Carter to a small cafe on the outskirts of town. The place smelled of coffee and cinnamon, a quiet refuge against the chaos pressing in from every side. They sat in the back corner, Carter holding a steaming cup of hot chocolate between both hands, while Mabel sipped her black coffee. "Grandma," Carter whispered, leaning across the table, "Mom told Miss Jenkins you're too tired to notice anything, that you'll just trust her and sign whatever she gives you." She laughed when she said it. Mabel's stomach turned. For years she had believed Rebecca's sweetness. For years she had opened her heart and her home. Now, each word from Carter was another knife twisting deeper. She reached across the table, resting her hand gently over Carter's. "We must be careful," she said, steady but quiet. "If they believe we suspect anything, we lose. Do you understand?" Carter nodded, his wide eyes full of fear but also trust. Mabel realized then that this child was her only ally in a house full of shadows. The following day, Mabel decided she could not fight this battle alone. She needed someone who had no ties to Rebecca, Caroline, or even Daniel. Someone she could trust with both her safety and Carter's. Her mind went back to the old days at Coal Industries, when the front doors were always guarded by a man named David Miller. David had been with the company for nearly 15 years before retiring. He was steady, quiet, and fiercely loyal. More than once he had walked Mabel to her car late at night, reminding her that not every kind of danger wore a mask of politeness. If there was anyone who would stand by her now, it would be him. She called him from the cafe's payphone, avoiding the house phone in case someone was listening. When his familiar voice answered, the knot in her chest loosened just a little. "Mrs. Cole," he said warmly, "it's been too long. What can I do for you?" Within the hour, David arrived at the cafe. His shoulders were still broad, his eyes sharp with the kind of alertness that never really fades. Mabel explained only what she dared, careful not to reveal Carter's role. She told him she suspected foul play, that documents were being forced upon her, that she needed someone to watch the house discreetly. David listened, nodding slowly. When she finished, he leaned forward. "I'll help you, Mrs. Cole. And I'll keep an eye on Carter too. But you must be careful. If what you suspect is true, they won't hesitate to push harder." That evening, as David circled the neighborhood, Mabel noticed something chilling. A black sedan was parked just a few houses down from hers, its engine off but its lights faintly glowing. It had not been there before. Carter pressed closer to her side, whispering, "Grandma, someone's watching us." Mabel's stomach sank. The game had already begun, and the walls were closing in. The following evening, Rebecca announced she would make dinner herself. She moved around the kitchen with the elegance of a hostess preparing for honored guests. The smell of roasted beef and garlic filled the house, warm and familiar. To anyone else, it would have been comforting. To Mabel, it felt like a trap. She sat at the table, her hands folded neatly in her lap, watching every move Rebecca made. Carter slipped into the kitchen quietly, his small eyes alert. He leaned close to Mabel and whispered so faintly she barely heard. "Grandma, I saw her pour something from a folded piece of paper into the stew." Mabel's chest tightened. She forced her face to remain calm, nodding as though Carter had simply told her a joke. Rebecca approached the table with a glowing smile, carrying the dishes as if nothing in the world could be wrong. "Mom, you worked too hard," Rebecca said sweetly. "Tonight you just relax and enjoy. I made this special for you." Mabel took her plate, raising her fork with steady hands. The food looked delicious, the aroma strong, but beneath it lingered something faintly bitter. A scent she recognized from years ago: sleeping pills, the kind her own mother once used. She cut a small piece, lifted it to her mouth, and forced herself to chew slowly. All the while she kept her eyes on Rebecca, who watched every bite too carefully. After a few moments, Mabel smiled politely. "It's wonderful, dear. You really outdid yourself." Then she pressed her napkin to her lips, excused herself quietly, and walked to her room. Behind the closed door, she spat the food into the trash, rinsed her mouth, and steadied her shaking hands. Minutes later, Carter slipped in through the side door. His eyes were wide with fear. "I knew it," he whispered. "I knew she was trying to make you sick." Mabel knelt, holding his shoulders firmly. "Listen to me, Carter. You must never let her see you're suspicious. Pretend everything is normal. Promise me." He nodded, though his lips trembled. Mabel hugged him close, her heart breaking at the thought. Her daughter-in-law had crossed a line, and now the danger was undeniable. 2 nights later, Mabel stepped out into the garden for some air. The house was quiet, yet she caught the soft sound of someone weeping. Following the faint cries, she found Caroline Jenkins, her longtime assistant, sitting on the stone bench under the old oak tree. Caroline's shoulders showed, her face buried in her hands. "Caroline," Mabel said gently, "what's wrong?" Caroline startled, quickly wiping her tears. "Oh, Mrs. Cole, I'm sorry. I didn't want anyone to see me like this." Mabel sat beside her, studying the woman she had trusted for decades. "I've known you too long to believe this is nothing. Tell me." Caroline hesitated, her lips trembling. At last she whispered, "It's my daughter, Anna. She's sick, very sick. They told me she has a rare heart condition. The bills are impossible, and if I don't cooperate, they'll stop her treatment. Rebecca promised everything would be paid for, but only if I help." The words struck Mabel like a blow. A mother's fear, a child's life, this was the chain Rebecca had wrapped around Caroline's neck. But deep down, Mabel's instinct screamed. Something about the story didn't fit. She had never once heard of Anna's illness before. "Caroline," Mabel said softly, "do you have the hospital papers?" Caroline nodded, pulling a folder from her purse with shaking hands. Mabel glanced through it, her sharp eyes catching irregularities. The doctor's signature looked photocopied, the hospital letterhead slightly blurred. Something was terribly wrong. "Where did these come from?" Mabel pressed. "They were delivered by courier," Caroline whispered. "I never even saw the doctor." Mabel closed the folder, her decision firming. Rebecca had fabricated an illness, forged documents, and preyed on Caroline's love as a mother. It was manipulation of the cruelest kind. And now, Mabel knew she held a weapon, proof that Rebecca's schemes were deeper and darker than she had imagined. The morning of the board meeting arrived with an air of false celebration. Rebecca had arranged everything, from the catered breakfast to the carefully stacked contracts that waited at the head of the long mahogany table. To any outsider, it looked like a normal corporate gathering. To Mabel, it felt like walking into an ambush. Mabel entered the room slowly, Carter's warning heavy in her mind. Caroline sat near the end of the table, her hands clasped tightly, knuckles white. Mr. Thompson, the lawyer, shuffled papers nervously, avoiding eye contact, and Rebecca, glowing in her tailored suit, welcomed everyone with the charm of a queen certain of her crown. "Mom," she said brightly, "today will be a turning point for the company. All you have to do is sign, and we can carry the legacy forward together." Mabel forced a small smile, her eyes sweeping across the room. She lowered herself into the chair at the head of the table, the very seat she had occupied for decades. The pen gleamed beside the documents. As Rebecca launched into her speech about efficiency and the future, Mabel caught Caroline's trembling gaze. Caroline shifted in her chair, as though the weight of the secret she carried had finally become unbearable. When Rebecca slid the documents across the table, urging Mabel to sign, Caroline suddenly stood. Her voice broke. "Stop. I can't let this go on." She reached into her bag with shaking hands and pulled out a small USB drive. Rebecca's face drained of color. "Caroline, what are you doing?" With trembling fingers, Caroline handed the USB to Mabel. This has everything. The recordings, the threats, the truth. I can't live with the lies anymore." Rebecca lunged forward, but before she could snatch it away, the boardroom doors swung open. David Miller stepped inside, tall and unyielding, blocking her path. His presence froze the room. Mabel inserted the USB into the projector. A crackling recording filled the boardroom. Rebecca's voice, sharp and venomous, echoed through the speakers. "Once she signs, the house, the company, it's all mine. If Caroline resists, her daughter's treatment ends. I'll make sure of it." Gasp rippled across the table. Mr. Thompson sank into his chair, defeated. Caroline buried her face in her hands, sobbing. And Rebecca, her mask of sweetness shattered, stood exposed in front of everyone she had manipulated. "You think they'll believe this?" she spat, her voice wild. "You think anyone cares about a tired old woman clinging to her company?" Before Mabel could respond, the door opened once more. Carter entered, clutching the arm of Margaret's old friend Martha, who had called the police. 2 uniformed officers stepped in behind them, their presence sealing Rebecca's fate. Mabel rose slowly, her voice steady. "It's over, Rebecca. You wanted my signature, but instead you signed your own downfall." Rebecca's face twisted with fury as the officers placed her in handcuffs. The room, once filled with tension, now buzzed with the undeniable sound of justice. The boardroom emptied slowly after Rebecca was taken away, leaving only a heavy silence behind. Mabel remained seated at the head of the table, her hand resting on the worn wood, as though she were holding on to the very foundation of her life. Carter slipped into the chair beside her, his small hand curling around hers. The boy's courage had carried them both through the storm. Mr. Thompson cleared his throat, his voice low and weary. "Mrs. Cole, I should have spoken sooner. Rebecca pressured me, threatened my reputation, promised me rewards if I complied. I was weak." His shoulders slumped as if the weight of his choices had finally crushed him, unprepared to face the consequences. Mabel regarded him for a long moment, disappointment lining her face. "You will answer to the law, Mr. Thompson. But perhaps the truth you told today will count for something." Later that week, news came that the black sedan watching Mabel's home was tied to Rebecca's old accomplice, a man she had hired to falsify medical documents. His arrest confirmed what Mabel already suspected: Caroline's daughter had never been sick at all. The story of illness was a cruel fabrication, another tool Rebecca used to control and manipulate. When Caroline heard the truth, she broke down, sobbing into her hands. "I betrayed you, Mabel. I betrayed myself, all because I thought my child was in danger." Mabel placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "You were a victim too. What matters now is what you do next." Daniel, meanwhile, was devastated. He had defended Rebecca for years, blind to her ambition. Standing in his mother's office, he whispered, "I'm so sorry, Mom. I didn't see who she really was. I should have protected you." Mabel pulled her son into her arms, her voice quiet but firm. "We can't change what happened, Daniel, but we can choose to rebuild from here." For the first time in weeks, Mabel felt the faint stirrings of hope. The nightmare was ending, and though the scars would remain, the truth had finally come to light. Weeks passed, and the dust of the storm began to settle. The headlines no longer screamed Rebecca's name. Court proceedings moved forward, with her facing charges of fraud, coercion, and conspiracy. For Mabel, it wasn't victory she felt, only a deep ache that something as sacred as family had been twisted into betrayal. Carter remained her constant shadow, his presence a reminder of what truly mattered. Every morning he would run into her room, his laughter echoing like sunlight cutting through fog. "Good morning, Grandma," he'd say, and Mabel would feel her heart soften. Despite the wreckage, there was still love to hold on to. Caroline, free from Rebecca's threats, returned to Mabel not as an assistant but as a friend seeking redemption. She worked with renewed devotion, determined to rebuild trust. Mabel saw in her the courage of a mother who had been misled but still chose truth when it mattered most. "Mistakes don't define us," Mabel told her one evening. "What we do after does." Daniel, too, changed. He no longer let ambition blind him. Instead, he sat in the office with Mabel, asking questions, listening, eager to learn. In his eyes, she saw regret but also growth. I was wrong, Mom, he admitted quietly. But I want to be better, for you, for Carter. His words were not just an apology, they were a promise. In a quiet moment, Mabel stood by the rose bushes she had planted years ago with her late husband. She thought of the nights she had almost given in, the papers she nearly signed, the sedatives hidden in her food. She thought of Rebecca's sweet voice that masked venom, and of Carter's trembling hand clutching hers in the dark. And she whispered to herself, family is not blood alone. It's loyalty, it's courage, it's love that survives betrayal. Looking at Carter chasing butterflies in the garden, Mabel knew she had chosen the harder path, the path of truth. And though it had cost her dearly, it had saved the very soul of her family. As I sit here today sharing this story with you, I know it is more than just my family's journey. It is a reminder of how betrayal can wear the mask of love, how those we trust most can sometimes be the ones who wound us the deepest. But it is also proof that courage, even from the smallest voice like Carter's, can change the course of everything. Mabel's strength was not in never being afraid, but in facing fear head-on, refusing to be silenced, and choosing to fight for truth. Carter's bravery reminded us that even a child can carry wisdom beyond their years. Caroline's struggle showed that sometimes good people are trapped in terrible lies, yet redemption is possible when honesty finally wins. And Daniel's regret taught us that relationships, even broken ones, can begin again if we are willing to face the truth. To anyone listening who may feel trapped, whether by toxic relationships, manipulation at work, or betrayal at home, remember this: silence protects the betrayer, not the betrayed. Speaking out may feel terrifying, but it is the only way to reclaim your voice. I want you to ask yourself, if you were in Mabel's shoes, what would you do? Would you risk peace for truth? Or would you dare to face the storm to protect those you love? Share your thoughts with me in the comments. I love hearing your perspectives, your stories, your lessons, because every story shared is another light in the dark for someone else. If this story resonated with you, please take a moment to like this video, share it with a friend who may need the reminder, and subscribe to the channel for more true-to-life stories that reveal both the pain and the strength within families. Until next time, remember, betrayal may shake us, but it cannot break us if we hold on to truth and love.